Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Science Behind the Crime. I'm your host, Gianna Newberry, and today we are going to get into this episode by first talking about polymerase chain reaction. Polymerase chain reaction is a lab technique for rapidly producing and amplifying up to billions of copies of a specific part of DNA. Polymerase chain reaction involves using short synthetic DNA fragments called primers to select a segment of the genome to be amplified, and then multiple rounds of DNA synthesis amplify that segment. One thing that PCR is most notably used for is paternity testing, where banding patterns of DNA are compared to the child's DNA. You may be asking, what does this have to do with forensic science? Well, actually, similarly to paternity tests, banding patterns can be used to compare DNA from a crime scene to the DNA of a suspect. That is, of course, if the DNA is legally obtained. Even if a suspect's DNA isn't collected or there isn't a suspect, it's interesting because DNA databases have grown so much, and so DNA from a crime scene can be compared to the databases. Not only can this connect one specific person to a crime scene, but it can also connect one crime scene to another, which is just crazy. And this would be, of course, if one person was connected to both of these crime scenes. DNA databases are wonderful tools, but of course the downside is that DNA would have had to have been previously collected from either a crime scene or suspects or persons of interest. And so if someone responsible for a crime had never committed a crime previously, or had never had DNA collected or anything like that, then of course the DNA wouldn't be in the database. Nevertheless, it's so interesting, and it's just another way that science, specifically biology, is related to forensics. That being said, I wanted to introduce another really interesting topic that we looked at in my inquiry in math and science class, and that is blood spatter analysis. There are so many things that blood spatter patterns can reveal about a crime scene, such as angle of impact, the position of the weapon used to cause the wounds that led to the blood spatter, and even the position of the person inflicting these wounds. Now, of course, this would be a general position, but still, it's very insightful. And even though it's not an exact science, blood spatter analysis can and does a lot of the time prove certain inconsistencies, perhaps in testimonies. And one case in which this does happen is actually the Lululemon murder. I know that's a weird name, but bear with me, I'm going to give you the context. So, Jana Murray was a 30-year-old graduate student working at Lululemon, which is a well-known athletic clothing store, and the location of the store was in Bethesda, Maryland. Also working at the store was 29-year-old Brittany Norwood, and this all started on March 11 of 2011. Murray and Norwood were working the closing shift at Lululemon, and before the night ended, the women checked each other's bags as per the store policy, and Murray had actually found a pair of stolen leggings in Norwood's stuff. Both women left the store at 9:45 p.m., and a few minutes later, Murray called a manager to let her know about the leggings. And soon after, Norwood had actually called Murray and told her that she accidentally left her wallet in the store and needed to go back for it. So, at around 10:05 p.m., Norwood and Murray re-entered the store, and this was the last time that Murray would be seen alive. The next morning, one of the store managers walked in and discovered a horrifying scene. There was so much blood, one person seemed to be dead, and another person was alive and tied up with zip ties. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered Jana Murray face down in a pool of her own blood, and Brittany Norwood was the one found with zip ties tied up in the bathroom. Norwood had told police that when she and Murray entered the store to get her wallet, two men slipped in behind them, sexually assaulted them, and then killed Murray while leaving Norwood tied up but alive. The police did investigate this, and they started to look for these supposed perpetrators. However, after speaking with Norwood several times, the police started to notice some inconsistencies in her story. For example, she had told the police she was never in Murray's car, but detectives had found her blood inside of it. It didn't take long for police to figure out what really happened. Just 1 week later, on March 18th of 2011, Norwood was arrested for Murray's murder. After Murray had found the stolen leggings in Norwood's belongings, Norwood lured Murray back into the store using the wallet story and proceeded to use several tools to murder Jaina, including a hammer, a knife, a peg, a rope, and a box cutter. She had at least 331 injuries on her body. After the murder, Norwood left the store and moved Murray's car to a parking lot, and she sat there for about an hour and a half trying to come up with a plan to cover her tracks. Then she went back to Lululemon and decided to stage a robbery, so she took money out of the cash register. She then sliced open her own forehead and cut Murray's pants to make it seem like she had been sexually assaulted. Then she put on a pair of size 14 men's shoes, stepped in a puddle of Murray's blood, and then walked around the store to spread these footprints and make it seem like it was a male walking around the store responsible for this crime. After she was done with all of that, she tied her own hands and feet with zip ties, and then she went into the bathroom and waited until the next morning when the store manager had arrived. Along with these inconsistencies in Norwood's story, there was also a blood spatter expert who testified and said that A, the blood found on the walls in the crime scene was typical of a severe beating situation, and B, he also testified that there was blood found under a bookshelf near Murray's body, and this basically meant that she would have had to have been on the ground during the beating for the blood to end up there. Norwood had originally claimed that Murray was fighting off the supposed attackers, and that was when they killed her, but the blood expert said, quote, "It simply can't get there from a standing up fight," end quote. The trial was held in January of 2012, and Brittany Norwood was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In this case, blood spatter analysis didn't tell us anything about the angle of impact, but it did point out an inconsistency in Norwood's story, which contributed to further investigation and subsequently her arrest. This case is so saddening. I mean, Murray was just doing her job, and she was brutally murdered as a result of it. I hope you all would keep Jaina Murray and her family in your thoughts. Even though this crime happened several years ago, it's always important to remember the victim and sympathize with the family. So that was the Lululemon murder, and it's crazy and interesting how blood spatter analysis is always portrayed as being almost like an exact science in TV shows. Off the top of my head, I think of Dexter, which is a really well-known TV show, and it's about this guy who's a serial killer, but he only murders bad people. And he's able to cover up his tracks so well because he's also a forensic blood spatter analyst. And throughout the show, you see all kinds of cases being solved because of the blood spatter analysis. In reality, though, blood spatter analysis has a lot of faults too. Earlier this year, actually, an article was published and it mentioned a study where 75 practicing bloodstain pattern analysts reviewed and analyzed pictures of bloodstain patterns that represented a broad spectrum of cases, and the analysts were given prompts to categorize what they were looking at, and they were also asked to provide an analysis, and basically the main finding was that 11.6% of the conclusions by participants regarding the cause of the blood was wrong. Of course, the cause was known by those conducting the study. So yeah, not all participants were able to come to an agreement, and this just highlights how blood spatter analysis is not an exact science. If anything, it gives us more general insight as seen in the Lululemon murder case, where the position of the blood under the bookshelf went against what Norwood was saying about Murray standing up fighting an attacker. We as a society, and I'm included in this, I'm not exempt from this, but I'd like to think that I've improved. Anyways, we tend to look at TV and all of these shows about CSI, and we start to believe them. And this is scary because of the CSI effect theory, which I think is very valid. I mean, jurors are expecting things because of these TV shows that exaggerate certain things, certain aspects of forensics, and so I think it's important to educate ourselves and draw a really clear line between what's real and what's simply entertainment. But anyways, that is all I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it and found this episode to be insightful. Thank you for tuning in on episode 4 of The Science Behind the Crime. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.